Welcome to Cardano for Everyone, a podcast series from Pasta Steak Pool. Each episode explores something new about Cardano in a way that's simple and accessible for everyone. In the mood for some Cardano magic? Let's get started.
Welcome to the deep dive. We're tackling Marlowe today. Cardano's language, specifically for financial contracts. We'll dig into the design, the way it works with Cardano, and what you can actually build.
A lot of people are excited about this. Marlowe's focus is to make blockchain finance, user-friendly and very secure, especially with when you're dealing with money.
Now, I've come across this term domain-specific languages, but honestly, it sounds a bit jargony. Like, what's the benefit compared to using, I don't know, something like Python that, everyone's familiar with?
Okay. Think about it this way. A general purpose language is like having a toolbox with all sorts of tools for anything. Marlowe's more like a set of instruments, like perfectly crafted instruments, specifically for finance, financial contracts. It's precise, it's secure, and it helps you avoid costly mistakes.
So less chance of hammering your thumb, so to speak.
Marlowe's language is built around 5 core commands. You have pay, when, if, let, and close. These are like building blocks. They let you define the logic of a contract in a way that's both human readable but also machine executable on the blockchain.
Okay, now you've got me intrigued. Can we walk through an example? Let's say I'm buying something online, but I only want to pay when I get the product. How would that work with Marlowe?
Sure. Let's say you're buying a rare vintage comic book. With Marlowe, you and the seller could create a contract that says, when the buyer confirms delivery, then pay the agreed amount to the seller.
So the money's held securely until I get my hands on that mint condition Spider-Man issue.
Exactly. The contract makes sure that no one can run off with the funds or the comic until the conditions are met. It's like a digital escrow service built directly into the system.
Now, all of this is running on Cardano. Cardano uses this EUTXO. Could you explain that?
Cardano's extended UTXO model, yeah, it's a bit different from the account-based systems that you see in many other blockchains. It's like a chain of sealed boxes, each representing a specific transaction output. What makes it great for Marlowe is it ensures each step of the contract execution is secure and verifiable.
So my comic book purchase isn't just like recorded on the blockchain, it's being actively managed at each step.
Each action, like confirming delivery or releasing the payment, triggers a new transaction, which updates the state of the contract in a secure and transparent manner.
Okay. Now that makes me think about security overall. How do we know these Marlowe contracts are really reliable, especially when dealing with finances?
Security is paramount, and Marlowe tackles that on multiple levels. So before a contract is even deployed, it goes through something called static analysis,
Okay.
which is kind of like a super-powered spell checker for your code. It can catch errors and potential vulnerabilities early on.
So like having a safety net to prevent those oops moments before they become real problems.
And it goes even further. Marlowe has been formally verified using something called the Isabelle theorem prover, which means that key properties of the language have been mathematically proven. Like ensuring that the total value going into a contract always equals the total value coming out.
Mathematically proven.
Yeah.
That's a level of certainty I can get behind. So no money mysteriously disappearing into the digital void.
That's the idea. Plus, Marlowe contracts are designed to avoid common pitfalls. Like contracts running forever and locking up funds. They have built-in mechanisms to guarantee termination and prevent those kinds of scenarios.
All of this sounds pretty high-tech, though. Is Marlowe only for, expert programmers, or can anyone get involved?
Well, that's the great thing about Marlowe. It's designed to be accessible to a wide range of users. For beginners, there's the Marlowe Playground, which is like a sandbox where you can experiment with contracts, building with blocks without any risk. You can test different scenarios, see how the contract logic works, and get comfortable with the language before deploying anything for real. It's a great way to learn and explore.
So I can build my contract in this playground. And then what? How does it get from there to the real Cardano blockchain?
Once you're happy with your creation, you can export it as code. You can do this in Haskell or JavaScript. Then you use Cardano's tools to deploy it to the mainnet.
So there are options for both the visual learners and those who are comfortable coding. This all sounds really technical. Why should, the average person care about this?
Well, because, this could really change how we all use money, right? Imagine if, all these financial agreements were clear. everyone could understand them.
That'd be nice, yeah.
That's what Marlowe's all about. Marlowe has these really tough checks in place, something called static analysis.
Okay.
Imagine there's this program. It checks your contract automatically for any errors before you even launch it.
But is there any way to be like absolutely certain there are no loopholes?
It's called formal verification. It uses mathematical proofs to guarantee that certain properties of your contract will always hold true. It might sound complicated, but it's really powerful.
So it's like you've got a mathematical guarantee that the contract's going to work as planned. That's amazing. I remember reading about Marlowe and this thing called ACTS. What is that?
So ACTS is like this set of globally recognized templates for modeling financial stuff. So by aligning with ACTS, Marlowe makes sure that its contracts follow all these established norms and stuff, which makes it a lot more widely applicable and less risk of misunderstandings.
So it's like everyone's speaking the same language, everyone's on the same page, no room for like misinterpretations or errors or anything like that. What other examples can you think of?
Well, Marlowe can also totally change how loans work. Think of a contract where everything is spelled out clearly, payments are automatic, and collateral is all managed, all on the blockchain.
That sounds pretty efficient.
Less risk for both sides, the lender and the borrower. More trust, more transparency.
So it sounds like Marlowe's already making some big waves. What does the future hold for it? Like, is it always evolving and changing?
The devs are always working on it, adding new features, adding support for roles and tokens, which is going to make the contracts even more flexible.
Roles and tokens. Tell me a little more about that.
So think about it like digital badges. They give you special permissions within a contract, so you can control who does what, who can participate in the agreement.
So it adds like another layer of, I guess you could say, control or even detail to the whole contract.
And there's this big push for interoperability, too, letting these Marlowe contracts talk to other blockchains and creating this bigger connected financial system. The goal is to, empower people and businesses to really take control of their finances and be a part of this open and fairer financial system.
A powerful vision. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's rewind a little. Tell me about how Marlowe came to be. Like, where did this all start?
So the story of Marlowe really starts back in 2018, early days of Cardano.
Mm-hmm.
It was part of this Gauguin era, when they were bringing smart contracts to the blockchain.
So Marlowe's been in the works for a while. Who are the brains behind this?
Well, it was spearheaded by this guy, Professor Simon Thompson, a real expert in functional programming and formal methods.
So he knew his stuff.
Yeah, his expertise was crucial in, making Marlowe what it is today.
And then in 2022, they integrated the ACTUS standard we talked about, a big step towards, standardization and interoperability. It gave Marlowe this level of standardization and credibility, made it more widely adoptable.
Yeah, it was huge. And then June 2023, big moment, it went live on the Cardano mainnet.
Oh, wow. So that means it was ready for real-world use.
Exactly. At its core, Marlowe is all about simplicity and accessibility.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted to make a language that was easy to understand, easy to use, even if you didn't have a hardcore tech background.
So they were making these powerful tools available to everyone. So what else was important to them?
Well, interoperability was big. They knew that for Marlowe to really take off, it had to be able to talk to other systems, other platforms. So that's why they went with that ACTUS standard, and they're working on that cross-chain interoperability. And lastly, flexibility, adaptability. Marlowe was made to handle a whole range of financial tools and situations from, simple loans to those complex derivatives and everything in between.
Okay, so we talked about all these high-level things. Let's get a little more hands-on. How these Marlowe contracts are structured, how they actually work in practice.
Of course. So let's go back to those 5 core constructs of Marlowe. Pay, close, if, when, and let. So pay, as you might guess, is all about moving money from one person to another.
Within a contract?
Exactly. You can actually set conditions that have to be met. The funds are only released when certain things happen, certain criteria. So for example, in that escrow agreement, you could use pay to say, okay, the money only goes to the seller after the buyer says, hey, I got the stuff. All right, and then we have close, which basically means the contract's over. Any money left over gets sent back to the right people.
It ties everything up neatly, no loose ends.
No money just hanging out. Now it's some decision making. The if construct for that.
So it's like the contract can choose between different options.
It's like a fork in the road. The contract takes one path if something is true and a different one if it's false. For example, let's say we're doing a loan contract. We could use if to offer different interest rates depending on the borrower's credit score.
That makes sense, yeah.
So if their score's good, lower rate, if not, a little higher.
Personalized loans tailored to each person.
Now let's talk about time.
Okay, time is money, right?
Let's just say that certain things in the contract should only happen at specific times or after something specific happens. So like in our escrow example, we could use when to say, hey, the seller only gets paid after the buyer confirms they got the goods. The contract just waits for that confirmation.
That makes sense. It keeps everything running smoothly.
And lastly, we have let, which is all about, variables and calculations.
All right, now we're getting to the mathy side of things.
A little bit, yeah. But it's not too bad. Basically lets us define these variables, do calculations right there in the contract, so we can create these more complex agreements where the terms can change based on different things.
So it's like having a built-in calculator that can adjust things on the fly.
And all these 5 constructs work together. Pay, close, if, when, and let. They make this really versatile language for all sorts of financial agreements.
It's amazing how these simple pieces can be combined to make such like sophisticated, complex things. And it's not just about defining the logic. There's also the formal methods to make sure it's all correct and secure.
So in Marlowe, that means we can actually prove mathematically that the contracts are going to execute properly. And to do this, they use tools like Isabelle.
What's that?
Isabelle's this sophisticated software tool. It's used to create these formal mathematical proofs. It acts like this really strict auditor. It checks the code, makes sure it does what it should.
So it's like having a whole team of mathematicians looking over your shoulder, making sure you didn't make any mistakes. Okay, so we talked about the structure of the contracts, the tools, but how did these contracts actually come to life on the blockchain?
So let's walk through the life cycle of a Marlowe contract.
I like it.
So it all starts with creation, obviously.
How do they get created?
Using a tool like the Marlowe Playground writes out the terms of the agreement, and that makes this Marlowe contract code. Code holds the logic of the financial instrument they're making.
So it's like writing the blueprint or the actual legal document.
Then that code gets embedded into a transaction output. And that creates this UTXO, that container we talked about, that represents the initial state of the contract.
So it's like putting the contract in a safe place, ready to go.
And this UTXO might also have some initial funds or assets that are part of the agreement.
Like a deposit or something.
Yeah, exactly. Like putting your money where your mouth is, And once that transaction is sent to the network and included in a block, the contract is officially deployed.
All right, so now it's live.
It's live. The contract is active.
What happens next?
Well, next is execution, actually carrying out the terms of the agreement.
So how do the people involved, interact with it?
The execution of a Marlowe contract, it's a series of transactions. Each one kind of consumes and produces these UTXOs. So each transaction updates the state of the contract as it goes along.
So it's like taking steps, moving the agreement forward, closer to the end.
Each transaction that messes with the contract, it has to follow the rules set out in the contract's validator, which is basically the Marlowe code itself. And these conditions, they could be all sorts of things, like making a payment, choosing between different options, even just waiting a certain amount of time. And as each transaction is, checked and added to the blockchain, the contract's state is updated.
Okay, so it's constantly evolving, reflecting the progress of the agreement.
And eventually, if everything goes smoothly, we get to the final stage, the ACTUS construct.
The grand finale.
So any remaining funds, assets, anything held in the contract's UTXOs, they get redistributed to the right people, as set out in the original agreement.
So everyone gets what they were promised.
That's the point. The contract is done, finished.
It served its purpose.
Can't be touched anymore. Its life cycle is over.
It's amazing how these Marlowe contracts fit with that EUTXO model of Cardano. Now, there's one more thing I want to touch on. The Marlowe runtime, what does it do?
So the Marlowe runtime is like the engine that powers the whole thing. It runs the Marlowe contracts on the Cardano blockchain. It's the connection between the on-chain world, the blockchain, and the off-chain world.
So it's like the bridge between, the code and the real world.
It handles all the user interactions and the updates to the blockchain, and it makes sure the rules of the contract are actually enforced.
It makes sure the contracts run smoothly, and it's a key part of why Marlowe is so user-friendly. And it shows how well-designed Marlowe is. Each piece works together perfectly. Well, Marlowe was developed by this amazing team at IOG, Input Output Global.
The folks behind Cardano.
They're known for pushing the limits of blockchain tech. A big part of it was making blockchain more accessible, especially in finance. They saw that the traditional smart contract languages were really hard for people to understand.
So they wanted to break down those barriers. Marlowe was designed to be simple, user-friendly.
Democratizing access to these financial tools.
They also wanted to bring more security and reliability to financial agreements. They saw that traditional systems were often opaque, centralized.
So they wanted to build something more transparent, more trustworthy.
That's it. And Marlowe addresses those concerns head-on with the formal verification, the deterministic execution, all that good stuff. It creates a level of security you just don't see in traditional finance. They also saw the importance of standardization and interoperability in the financial world. And that's why they integrated that ACTUS standard, remember?
To create a common language.
It's like building a universal translator. It's clear that this is more than just a tool. It's like a catalyst for change. It's empowering people to reimagine how we use money, how we design financial agreements.
Well, let's talk about the real world for a second. How does Marlowe fit into this bigger picture of global finance?
That's where the ACTUS standard comes in. ACTUS is a set of globally recognized standards for financial contracts. By incorporating these standards, Marlowe ensures that the contracts you build are compatible with existing financial practices and regulations.
So like a universal translator, making sure everyone in the financial world can understand and work with these blockchain-based contracts.
This interoperability is crucial for wider adoption and for integrating blockchain finance with traditional systems.
That's clever.
It's definitely an exciting field, and now that we have a good grasp of what Marlowe is and how it works, it's time to explore what it can actually do.
Okay, let's dive into those real-world applications.
So let's look at how Marlowe is being used today. One area where it really shines is in escrow agreements. Think about like buying something online from someone you've never met before. Both sides have a bit of risk there. The buyer worries about paying and not getting the item. The seller worries about shipping and then not getting paid.
Traditionally, you'd need a third party, like a lawyer or escrow service, to manage everything, which adds time, cost, and honestly, it's still not foolproof.
And with Marlowe, you cut out that middleman. You build that trust directly into the contract. So imagine the buyer and seller agree on the terms, like the price, the delivery conditions, even what happens if there's a dispute. This becomes the Marlowe contract. It's deployed to the blockchain. It's there for everyone to see.
So the blockchain is holding the funds until those conditions are met.
The contract logic handles everything automatically. Once the seller provides proof of shipment, maybe a tracking number, the funds are released. If something goes wrong, the dispute resolution process kicks in. And all of this is governed by the code they agreed on up front.
Sounds incredibly efficient and transparent. No more worrying about whether the escrow agent is trustworthy. What other use cases are out there?
Another exciting area is peer-to-peer lending, often called P2P.
Okay.
People want alternatives to traditional banks, but there are always risks involved. Marlowe lets borrowers and lenders create a really detailed agreement on the blockchain.
Okay.
This includes things like the loan amount, the interest rate, the repayment schedule, even collateral if needed. Once that's agreed upon, the contract manages the entire process: disbursement, repayments, interest calculation, even handling collateral if necessary.
So the contract itself becomes the trusted intermediary, making sure everyone follows the rules. It sounds much more efficient than traditional lending.
And because everything happens on the blockchain, it's also very transparent. Lenders can see exactly how their funds are being used. Borrowers have a clear record of their repayments. This reduces the need for trust between parties, which opens up new possibilities for lending and borrowing.
It feels like we're talking about a whole new level of financial freedom and accessibility.
That's a key goal of decentralized finance, or DeFi. And Marlow's a powerful tool for achieving that. But escrow and P2P lending are just the start. Marlowe is flexible enough to handle much more sophisticated financial instruments. Marlowe can certainly handle complex instruments, even derivatives. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. The important point is that Marlowe's building blocks let you express very nuanced financial logic.
So even if I don't fully understand derivatives, the point is that Marlowe can handle that level of complexity in a secure and transparent way.
And as the DeFi ecosystem grows, we're likely to see even more innovative uses of Marlowe. But for now, let's get back to the basics.
We've seen the cool stuff Marlowe can do, but I'm still kind of curious about the tech behind it, like what makes it tick.
Okay, well, remember we talked about Cardano's EUTXO model, which makes their execution very secure and deterministic. It means that given the same inputs, the contract will always produce the same output.
But how does the actual execution work? Does it involve Cardano's main smart contract language?
Yes. Marlowe is designed to work with Plutus Core, which is Cardano's lower-level language for smart contracts. You can think of Plutus Core as the foundation,
Okay.
and Marlowe as this specialized layer built on top.
So Marlowe provides these user-friendly tools, but it's still backed by the power and security of Plutus.
Exactly. When a Marlowe contract is deployed, it's essentially translated into Plutus Core code that can then be executed on the Cardano blockchain.
That's a pretty clever way to combine ease of use with robustness.
Marlowe is great for the core logic of these agreements. But it's important to remember that it's a domain-specific language. It's not designed for general-purpose programming or building these complex applications with, user interfaces and all that.
So it's like a specialized tool, really good for certain things.
It's like a scalpel. Super precise, but not for every job. If you're building something really complex with a lot of moving parts, you might need something more general purpose like Plutus. It can handle a wider range of tasks.
So they're totally separate.
Well, actually, the cool thing is they can work together.
Oh, really?
Imagine you're building a decentralized lending platform. You could use Marlowe for the financial logic of the loans. All the security, the accuracy, all that. And then you could use Plutus to build the user interface, handle user accounts, all the other interactions.
So it's like combining the best of both worlds. And we've talked about the Marlowe playground a lot. That's a great tool for learning and experimenting, right?
You can play around with Marlowe contracts in a safe environment. You can write contracts, simulate them, see how they behave.
So you can learn by doing.
You can tweak things, test different scenarios, all without any risk. It makes Marlowe accessible to everyone.
Whether you're a beginner or a pro.
It's a great place to learn, to test ideas, and to share what you create.
How could Marlowe change the world of finance?
Well, it has the potential to be a game changer. Imagine a future where all financial agreements are transparent, secure, everyone can understand them.
A more equitable system.
Marlowe can empower people, give them control over their finances, let them participate in new markets, access new products.
It's about shifting the power.
It is. It's about giving people more choices.
So what's next for Marlowe? What's on the horizon?
Well, the team is always working on it, improving the tools, the infrastructure, making the playground even better, building new tools for analysis, simulation, debugging.
So they're making it easier for developers to work with.
And they're also exploring new use cases.
Like what?
Insurance, real estate, supply chain management, even voting systems.
Wow, that's a lot. What can our listeners do, if they want to learn more, maybe even get involved in this space?
Well, the Marlowe playground is always a great place to start.
Right, that's where you can experiment, play around.
You can build some basic contracts, get a feel for how it works. And if you want to go deeper, there's tons of stuff online, tutorials, all that good stuff.
It seems like Marlowe and decentralized finance in general have a potential to really shake things up. What's your final takeaway for our listeners who are just starting to explore this world?
Stay curious. There are great resources like the Marlowe Playground where you can learn by doing. And as this ecosystem grows, remember, we're all shaping this new financial landscape together.
Great advice. A huge thank you to our expert for this deep dive into Marlowe. To our listeners, remember, keep exploring, keep learning, and who knows, maybe you'll be building the next big thing in decentralized finance. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for being part of Cardano for Everyone. We hope you gained something valuable from today's episode. If you'd like to support our mission of making Cardano knowledge accessible for all, consider selecting Pasta from the pool list when you delegate. Every bit of support helps us bring more content to listeners like you. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and we'll see you on the next episode.